Despite the worldwide pandemic, which has brought so many sports leagues to a screeching halt, the U.S. Tennis Association is expected to hold the 2020 U.S. Open starting at the end of August. And new today, Novak Djokovic, one of the world's foremost tennis players, just announced that he has tested positive for the coronavirus. He had vocally been a critic of the precautions being taken by the U.S. Open. Here to discuss that and so much more is Lew Sherr, the Chief Revenue Officer for the U.S. Tennis Association. Lew, great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure figuring out how to move forward with various sports events, obviously a huge dilemma for so many leagues and associations right now. It seems like every day Major League Baseball seems like they're getting closer, and then we find out something else has happened. What were the discussions like among your colleagues over the USTA when it was coming to announcing whether or not to have the U.S. Open still in August?
Yeah, well, first, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's been a roller coaster for us all the way from the very beginning, but we're very excited about where we've ultimately landed. We announced last week that, again, we will be playing on our original dates in New York, but with no fans in attendance. Early on in the process, going back to, late February, March, it seemed like we would be safely on the other side of this at the end of the summer when people expected that the warm temperatures were going to beat down the virus and sort of quell the pandemic. Clearly, as time went on, it was looking less and less like that would be the case. That certainly has proven to be the case. And we started looking at other scenarios ranging from full-on cancellation to postponement to relocation. We spent a lot of time working with a medical advisory staff and using three primary guidelines to sort of guide our decision making. First and foremost, whatever we did had to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone involved in the competition, not just the players, the officials, the ball persons, the camera people, lines persons, cleaning crews, whatever the case may be. Secondly, the event had to be in the best interests of our sport, that we needed to deliver something to fans that would be positive, that would be additive, and would be well received around the world. And then finally, it had to be financially viable, not just for the USTA, but also for the athletes that would be competing. And thankfully, our ultimate decision, which is, again, to play beginning August 31st in New York with no fans, and to actually bring another tournament, the Western and Southern Cincinnati Open, to New York to play the week before, also with no fans on site, is the solution that checked all of those boxes.
Lew, no, let's stick with finances on this because you're obviously the best person to talk about with this. Coronavirus obviously impacting all the sports financially. What kind of strategies are you putting in place to offset a lot of that marketing dollars that you guys would have been losing from having the event and fans being in the stadium?
Yeah, well, I will say the economic model for this event looks like no other U.S. Open in history, both on the revenue side and on the expense side, right? We're investing in facilities for players and medical equipment and testing that we would never do in a typical year. And the revenues certainly are going to be very different because we're not selling tickets, we're not selling hospitality. Having said that, under the leadership of our Chief Financial Officer, Ed Nepple, we have been carrying large reserves year in and year out to save up for a rainy day, if you will. We're certainly experiencing that this year. The ability to play the event, the ability to broadcast the event in hundreds of countries and territories around the world will preserve our broadcast revenue and also preserve a significant amount of our sponsorship revenue, as many of our partners are choosing to use the Open as a platform to expose their brands globally. So, all of that combined makes for a viable event financially, but certainly not an event that would be typical or illustrative of any other type of U.S. Open.
Well, we know there's such a huge appetite right now for everybody just to watch any sort of live sporting event right now. The NFL draft ratings were the highest that they've ever seen in quite a long time. Are you expecting ratings for this to be really huge? And as a result of that, can you make more money off of the advertising to offset the losses from no fans being in the stadium?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we are certainly seeing, not just in the U.S., but around the world, huge audiences for any live sports events that are airing, whether it be NASCAR, whether it be the NFL draft, as you mentioned, horse racing returned last week. We're seeing that globally with European soccer also. So we do expect our ratings to be up significantly. We don't benefit directly from the sale of advertising during the event. The networks that are broadcasting our event all throughout the world, ESPN here in the US, enjoy the benefit of that. Our fees are not dependent on ratings delivery or advertising delivery, but we are expecting this to be a huge year. And that's part of the reason, in a strange way, we're excited to reimagine what this event can look like. We've never had the opportunity to play an event with no fans on site and produce it just for television. From an intellectual sort of curiosity standpoint, this year is giving us an opportunity to reimagine our sport and the presentation of our sport in a very different way, and we think it's going to be fantastic.
I only have another minute or so left with you,
Yeah.
Lew. I'm curious, what did you guys at the Tennis Association make of Novak Djokovic's criticism of the U.S. Open, the precautions that basically you guys were taking in the tournament? He was essentially saying it was really onerous to basically all the precautions you guys were taking. And have other stars of the sport reacted the same way as well?
Well, it's been very mixed, but I should start by saying we were not focused on any individual player reaction to our guidelines. We worked very closely with a medical advisory panel, with the state government, to develop guidelines that would ensure the mitigation of risk and the safety and well-being of everybody involved in the event. And that's more than the players. Again, it's the officials, it's the ball persons, it's the cleaning crews, the food service crews, the broadcast teams that are there covering the event. So that was our priority. Every player is going to have their own reaction. It's a very personal reaction. You're talking about safety and well-being to those plans and how those might impact their experience and whether or not they wanted to participate. We've had a large number of players. Serena Williams was one of the first out of the gate to express her excitement at playing in a very different U.S. Open than she would have experienced or anyone would have experienced before. So we feel terrific about that. It's been very unfortunate that Novak has now come down with the virus, he and his wife both, along with a number of other folks who were involved in his event that was held last week in Europe. They didn't adhere to any of the guidelines that we're looking at in instituting for this year's U.S. Open. Early on, his reaction was that we were too onerous. The feedback that we're getting now as a result of the players testing positive at that event is, have we done enough, and are we sure that we can protect their well-being? And I'm pleased to say that with, again, the guidance of a terrific medical advisory staff, we think we've been able to mitigate those risks, or will be able to mitigate those risks when we get to September.
All right. Well, I know I speak for a lot of people. We're very excited. 2 months away. Can't wait for the U.S. Open. Lew Sherr, Chief Revenue Officer for the U.S. Tennis Association. Great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.